Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, February 7th. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. We should note, Jill, we are awaiting your presence today at Mo News headquarters in Brooklyn.
Moshe, get excited. It will be the second time I go to the offices in Brooklyn, but I am excited to record the podcast in person.
Your quarterly visit. We have some exciting news coming your way. We're being profiled by a certain publication we'll tell you about very soon. So Jill is making her way in from Long Island, and we're excited for that. Jill, we have a large stock here of snacks thanks to Alex, my wife, who sent me in with a whole bunch of them. And we made a huge purchase of Girl Scout cookies. So get ready for a lot of Thin Mints and tag-alongs.
Well, that is much appreciated, especially given the story that we led our newsletter with yesterday, is that even Girl Scouts are not immune to inflation. Girl Scout cookies are costing a couple bucks more a box this year than last.
Yeah, we put that at the top of the Mo newsletter. If you don't subscribe, go check it out over at mo.news. It comes to your inbox daily. It's a nice addition, I think, if you like this podcast, to also get the headlines in your inbox. And yes, the headline is, everything is more expensive. And for the Girl Scouts to actually raise money, they also need to raise prices.
All right, well, save me a box of Thin Mints, and I'll see you in a couple hours, Moshe. Now let's get to some news here. In a historic case, the mom of the Michigan school shooter has been convicted of manslaughter. And in another case, a court rules that Donald Trump not immune from prosecution for allegedly trying to subvert the 2020 election. To the Middle East, a plan in place to prevent an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. And the news on Tuesday that 1 in 5 hostages have been confirmed dead, according to Israel. The status of a deal that would potentially pause fighting in exchange for more hostages released. And guess who's back? Back again. Adam Neumann trying to buy back WeWork.
But does he have the money, Jill, or is this just more Neumann shenanigans? We'll tell you.
In media news, Tucker Carlson is in Russia to interview Vladimir Putin. And a new major sports streaming platform announced by Fox, ESPN, and Warner Brothers, what it says about the state of the business. To education, after a pause for the pandemic, Dartmouth says that it will once again require SAT and ACT scores. And the New York Times is out with a controversial claim saying that the most foolproof way to cook fish, the microwave.
Jill, the Mo News community has many thoughts about this, and most of them are not very good. In fact, if you do this, I know several thousand people have told me they want to send you to jail.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, an important day in history as a president of the United States told the media to stop feeding the White House dog. I'll tell you about it.
All right, let's start with that verdict out of Michigan that could have major implications. A Michigan jury has found that Jennifer Crumbley is guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter related to her son's deadly mass shooting at a Michigan school in 2021. The jury deliberated for about 10 hours and found that, yes, the parent of a child who commits a mass shooting can also be held criminally responsible. The 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter are for each of the 4 students killed in her son's attack at Oxford High School back in November of 2021. Her son, Ethan, is now 17. He pleaded guilty to murder, terrorism, and other crimes and was sentenced in December to life in prison without parole. She now faces up to 15 years in prison for each of the 4 counts. And then there's her husband. He's going to be tried separately in a few weeks from now. Jurors looked at about 400 pieces of evidence, including text messages and photos from her cell phone and video of the shooting spree. Prosecutors made the argument that Crumbley was a neglectful mother and that she and her husband, quote, didn't do any number of tragically small and easy things that would have prevented all of this from happening.
Really historic case here out of Michigan. One piece of evidence they were looking at, Ethan's journal, found at the school after the shooting. He'd written about a plan to cause bloodshed, adding drawings of guns and pleas for help regarding his own mental health. He writes in that journal, quote, "My parents won't listen to me about help or a therapist," adding, I have zero help for my mental problems, and it's causing me to shoot up the effing school. It also turns out that Jennifer Crumbley took her son Ethan to the shooting range just days before his mass shooting. Now, she did claim during the trial that it was her husband who had purchased the gun used in the shooting and was responsible for storing the pistol. At the same time, Crumbley and her husband had been called to the school 2 hours before the attack after Ethan wrote troubling things on a worksheet like the words blood everywhere. A counselor said he was concerned about Ethan's mental health, but the parents decided to let him stay in school that day and did not search his backpack, which had a gun inside. There were also text messages that were featured during the trial between Crumbley and friends and colleagues that suggested she was more concerned with her horses than her son, and that also she was preoccupied with an extramarital affair she was having, as opposed to issues her son was having. And then there's another piece of evidence. When the school notified Jennifer Crumbley and her husband that Ethan had been searching online for ammo on his phone, Jennifer Crumbley texted her son, LOL, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught. So a lot of evidence here that clearly led the jury to make this guilty call.
But it wasn't necessarily a slam dunk case. The county prosecutor, Karen McDonald, who had made the decision to charge Ethan's parents in the first place, said that even members of her staff had actually pushed back on her about it. And part of that goes back to what Crumbley's lawyer had argued in her defense, basically that parenting is a tough job and that no parent is perfect. Her attorney saying, quote, this case is very dangerous for parents out there. She told the jury on Friday, I am asking that you find Jennifer Crumbley not guilty, not just for Jennifer Crumbley, but for every mother who's out there doing the best that they can, who could easily be in her shoes. A professor from Michigan Law School told the New York Times after the verdict, I think there are going to be a lot of parents out there who think if I have a troubled kid and I'm doing my best, at what point is his or her behavior no longer my responsibility?
Yeah, a lot of important questions here. But first, I just want to note, Jill, since you mentioned Crumbley's attorney, there have been a lot of questions and commentary about Crumbley's attorney. Her name is Shannon Smith. Basically, that she was a pretty terrible representative for Crumbley. There's a lot of clips on social media about the attorney's bizarre behavior in court, quoting Taylor Swift, cracking jokes, carrying out her full beauty routine in front of the judge. The attorney, Smith, here also talked about getting confused often, making mistakes in court. She also spoke to the jury about a hypothetical that if her son was sending nude pictures of himself to a girl, that she should not be guilty for her son sending child pornography. And again, that's just the beginning of it. There are, again, dozens and dozens of examples of the lawyer here conducting herself in a bizarre manner at times. So look out for Jennifer Crumbley to potentially call for a new trial here on the grounds that her attorney wasn't a proper representative. Again, not saying that Crumbley is not guilty here, but that her lawyer sort of sealed her fate. As far as the ramifications for the case that you also brought up, this is a case that is being closely watched because of how this could impact other cases. It's a bit of a test case here for prosecutors trying to hold the parents accountable for enabling violence by their children. Crumbley is the first parent in the U.S. to be charged over a mass school shooting committed by their child. In the last few months, parents whose children carried out gun violence in other states have pleaded guilty to charges of reckless conduct. Now, beyond school shootings, there have been a few cases in the last few months of parents whose children carried out gun violence in other states, and the parents have pleaded guilty to charges of reckless conduct or neglect. The charges here, involuntary manslaughter, more serious against Jennifer Crumbley. Some have criticized it, questioning why school officials weren't charged as well. An independent investigation last year alleged multiple failures from the school system, including allowing Ethan to return to class without checking his backpack. So wait to hear more out of this case. But given, Jill, just how many of these school shootings we've been experiencing in the last couple of years, it will be interesting to see whether other parents are prosecuted. And hopefully the effect here is that parents will be more attentive to their kids when they're experiencing these types of mental health issues.
All right, time now for the speed read from Politico. A federal appeals court ruled Tuesday that former President Trump, and indeed any other former president, can be prosecuted for alleged crimes they committed while in office. Trump's attorneys had been arguing that he has absolute immunity for anything he did as president, even after he leaves office. The unanimous 57-page decision from a 3-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals is a major win for special counsel Jack Smith. He is looking to put Trump on trial this year on federal felony charges stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Trump quickly vowed to appeal the decision, which could be at the Supreme Court by Monday. So back to this decision here. The judges wrote, quote, "For the purpose of this criminal case, former President Trump has become Citizen Trump with all of the defenses of any other criminal defendant, but any executive immunity that may have protected him while he served as president no longer protects him against this prosecution." The ruling affirms U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkin's conclusion that former presidents can be prosecuted for crimes that they committed in office, even if those alleged crimes arguably related to their official duties. Trump had been arguing that former presidents could not be prosecuted for such actions without first being impeached and convicted by Congress.
So you had the district judge who ruled that he's not immune from prosecution for what he did during president. And then it went to the appeals court here, the 3-judge panel, which also ruled the same way. So they could go directly to the Supreme Court. One other thing Trump could do is he could ask the full circuit, the full judge panel in the Court of Appeals to rehear the case, given that only 3 of them initially ruled on it. Either way, this is helpful to Trump as he tries to delay a trial here. The trial was supposed to begin on March 4th, but they had to cancel that date because of this appeal related to his argument that he shouldn't be prosecuted for anything he did as president, that he has immunity for life. But it is notable here that this appeals court ruling was unanimous, that all 3, the 2 liberals and the conservative, all ruled that no, presidents do not have immunity for life. And so that would mean that would indicate that a full panel of the appeals court probably rules the same way. The big question is, does the Supreme Court rule that way? And that's just one of the cases they're dealing with related to Trump. They have that other case coming up soon related to Colorado kicking Trump off the ballot. So a couple key Trump cases going to the highest court in the land. We should note the judges that ruled yesterday: 2 appointed by Biden, 1 appointed by George H.W. Bush, and they all ruled unanimously that longstanding doctrines of immunity for presidents from civil lawsuits related to their official duties do not extend to alleged criminal acts, and certainly not to a former president. You're just a regular person again. They rejected Trump's claim of categorical immunity, noting that even President Nixon, after he resigned, had to get a pardon from President Ford to ward off potential criminal charges during Watergate. And they also rejected the argument from Trump that he would have had to be impeached and convicted by Congress to then be eligible for a crime. These are the arguments we told you about recently, where one of his judges was asked a hypothetical about him committing any crime, including murder or killing people or assassinating people while president. And the attorney for Trump effectively argued, yeah, he's immune. He's the president. The judge is clearly not looking kindly upon that argument. The Trump spokespeople continue to repeat their claim that this is a bad precedent to set, that this will mean that all former presidents will be prosecuted by their political enemies in the future. So we'll see what happens here. Again, this delays the trial. And of course, if Trump is elected in November, this case would completely go away, even though he doesn't have immunity, because he would be running the Justice Department and could kill the 2 federal cases. So the classified records case and this election interference January 6th case.
Heading overseas to the Middle East from Axios, the U.S. and 4 of its European allies, France, the U.K., Germany, and Italy, hope to announce in the next few weeks a series of commitments made by Israel and Hezbollah to diffuse tensions and restore calm to the Israel-Lebanon border. Preventing a war between Israel and the Hezbollah terrorist group, which operates freely in Lebanon, has been a key objective for the Biden administration in its efforts to prevent the fighting in Gaza from expanding into a much wider regional conflict. Hezbollah began the most recent round of fighting by attacking Israel in the aftermath of the Hamas attack. As a way to show solidarity with the group, U.S. concerns about an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah grew last month after skirmishes along the border escalated following the Israeli assassination of a senior Hamas official in a strike in Beirut. While tensions have decreased slightly in recent days, the U.S. still wants to get understandings between the parties to ensure that the fighting stops.
So this deal, and again, potential deal, because we should mention everything in the Middle East is very up in the air until there's a deal, until both sides agree, as we've been covering varying deals here in recent months. But the expectations are that there would be a commitment by both parties to stop skirmishes on the border that have been taking place for about 4 months now, that it would be based on the principle of freezing in place. So Hezbollah would not have to withdraw its forces, but only commit to not sending them back to areas along the border. Instead, the Lebanese military would send troops to the border area with Israel. We should note, though, that the Lebanese military, historically very weak. Hezbollah, while it's only a group within Lebanon, has a much more overwhelmingly powerful military force than the Lebanese national military, sort of the way things have worked there for a while in Lebanon. The U.S. has asked Israel to stop overflight of its fighter jets over Lebanese airspace. As part of this deal, Israel would also commit to pulling out some of its forces from the border it's been amassing over several months. The hope here is to get Israeli citizens, Lebanese citizens back into their homes. Tens of thousands of them on both sides of the border are not able to return to their homes as this fighting, this low-grade war, you could call it, has been taking place. Israel has said now for a while that it is not intending to initiate a war with Lebanon, but is concerned Hezbollah is planning a major attack. Obviously, the lessons here for the Israelis off of October 7th is not to wait around, but potentially be preemptive. At the same time, Hezbollah has sort of been dismissing this, saying, America, just make sure Israel doesn't start a war on us. Hezbollah has been underestimating this, basically just telling the Americans, just make sure that despite everything going on, Israel shouldn't launch a full-scale war against us. The U.S. telling Hezbollah leaders, we don't control the Israelis here, especially if you guys miscalculate.
Also in the Middle East, from the New York Times, Israel says more than 1 in 5 hostages in Gaza are no longer alive. This news coming as Israel and Hamas seem to be inching closer to a deal to free hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and a ceasefire. Israeli intelligence officers have concluded that at least 30 of the remaining 136 hostages captured by Hamas and its allies on October 7th have died since the start of the war. The military spokesperson saying, quote, we have informed 31 families that their captured loved ones are no longer among the living and that we have pronounced them dead.
As of right now, they haven't confirmed the identities of those 31 in an official statement. This has been talked about, though, for a while in Israel, that not all the hostages are expected to come home alive or even alive at this moment. Though the story did get a lot of attention in the American media over the last day, Israeli intelligence officers also are assessing unconfirmed information that indicate that another 20 hostages beyond that may have also been killed. So it could be up to 50 here that are no longer alive. The bodies being kept by Hamas, though, to be used as part of a prisoner exchange in a ceasefire deal. Officials say that many of them are believed to have been killed on October 7th, and then again, their bodies held for the past few months. And it comes as the negotiations continue between the two sides. The Qataris came out on Tuesday saying that Hamas has put forth a counteroffer. And Tony Blinken right now, the Secretary of State, is in the region. He'll be in Israel today, where that'll be among the subjects he's discussing with Israeli senior officials.
From The Hill, conservative commentator Tucker Carlson said Tuesday that he secured an interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin and that he plans to publish it in the near future. This sit-down will mark the first time a member of Western media will interview Putin since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine that sparked the ongoing war between the two countries. Carlson posted a video to X explaining why he's doing this interview.
We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself.
Now, Carlson didn't specify when the interview will publish, but he was extremely critical of the American media and the U.S. government for what he described was blind support for Ukraine. Carlson, for a while now, has been saying extremely positive things about Vladimir Putin, among other authoritarian leaders, Viktor Orban in Hungary. He's been a big fan of for a couple years now, and has really been trying to push the other side here, that Putin is misunderstood and that Zelensky is the problem. At times using pretty misleading information, though, I should say. Carlson, as we covered last year, was fired from his job at Fox News and has been building his own independent media outlet, putting out shows on Twitter, or X as they call it now. So we'll be looking out for clips there. And Jill, I should mention, he talks about the American media ignoring the Putin perspective. One of the issues the American media has is that when journalists go over there, sometimes they end up in jail. by Vladimir Putin's authorities. Evan Gershkovich of the Wall Street Journal and another American right now are currently being held in prison on trumped-up spy charges, when in fact it appears they were just there reporting. Putin has made it incredibly challenging for reporters to report within Russia, and so that's one of the issues. So Carlson can say his piece, but ultimately here you've seen a couple American reporters who literally are behind bars for God knows how long for trying to do just that.
Some business news now from CNBC. Adam Neumann wants to buy the real estate company WeWork out of bankruptcy. WeWork, of course, is the company that Neumann co-founded in 2010 and that ousted him 9 years later. Neumann said he has the support of, quote, a well-known capital source, including Dan Loeb's Third Point. But the hedge fund told CNBC that it had not committed any financing and that discussions with Neumann were, quote, preliminary. Neumann and his startup Flow had consistently been expressing a sincere interest since December of 2023 to buy WeWork. A spokesperson for the company says, WeWork is an extraordinary company. As such, we receive expressions of interest from external parties on a regular basis. We and our advisors always review those approaches with a view to acting in the best interests of the company. Those efforts have stretched even further back than December, according to this letter. Neumann had tried to arrange financing of up to $1 billion back in October of 2022, but at the time was rebuffed by the former WeWork CEO.
So apparently Newman's been working on this for a while. He's frustrated. He hasn't heard back. He doesn't know if he has the funding. And so clearly he went public here, trying to force WeWork's hand, especially as WeWork has filed for bankruptcy in the last couple of months. And this is his baby, right? This is his brainchild until he was forced to step down, cede control, though we should note he got a $1.7 billion payout to go away based on his relationship with the company. But now he's back. WeWork is dealing with trying to renegotiate its leases with hundreds of landlords, again, file for bankruptcy here. And Neumann did oversee it from infancy through a $47 billion valuation. That's what it was valued at the peak there in 2019 as they were going public. But then many questions were raised about how well he was managing or not managing the company, how he controlled the company. There have been multiple streaming series put out about this, including Jared Leto playing Adam Neumann, Jill, which I thought Jared did a very good job playing Neumann. So we'll see here what comes of this. Again, Neumann is known to exaggerate and push the boundaries of truth. But at the same time, WeWork are not in the best state of affairs right now. So definitely a story to watch.
From the New York Times, Dartmouth College announcing that it would again require applicants to submit standardized test scores starting next year. This is a significant development because other selective colleges are now deciding whether to do so as well. Like many other colleges during the COVID pandemic, Dartmouth dropped its requirements that applicants submit an ACT or an ACT score. But now with the pandemic over and students again able to take the tests, Dartmouth's admissions team was thinking about reinstating the requirement. The school's new president wanted to know what the data had to say about it. So she asked 3 Dartmouth economists and a sociologist to dig into the numbers. And one of their main findings was that test scores were a better predictor than high school grades or student essays and teacher recommendations of how well students would fare at Dartmouth. And the evidence of this relationship is large and growing. A second finding was more surprising. During the pandemic, Dartmouth switched to a test optional policy in which applicants could choose whether to submit their ACT and SAT scores. And apparently this policy was harming lower income applicants in a specific way.
Yeah, the researchers were able to analyze the test scores even of the students who had not submitted their test to Dartmouth. Apparently the university would have wanted to see their test scores. It shows that they're trying to overcome various issues. Jill, it's an interesting debate that we've been following here because a lot of the rhetoric in the past couple of years is that mandatory testing, standardized testing is discriminatory. But it turns out that you're now seeing multiple studies that it turns out that the standardized testing is in fact non-discriminatory. In fact, at the University of California, they commissioned a study on test scores and found that they were actually very useful tools to find out who would be successful within the UC system and found they were non-discriminatory. And then UC actually ignored its own advice and still isn't using test scores So it'll be interesting to see this sort of reversion here to test scores, as universities want to ensure that if you get in, that you can actually succeed once you're there. And it appears here that the testing is effective in determining who's going to make it and who's not.
From the Wall Street Journal, Fox, ESPN, and Warner Brothers Discovery are creating a joint streaming platform to share sports assets, a move that comes as the price of sports rights is dramatically increasing. The standalone service will be available to ESPN Plus, Hulu, and Max subscribers, and each company will own 1/3 of the product. This is according to people familiar with the matter. The still unnamed platform is essentially a sports streaming bundle, and it's expected to launch later this year. ESPN is still exploring options for a strategic partner. In July, Disney's chief executive Bob Iger announced that he was looking for a strategic partner for the sports network and was open to selling an equity stake.
So, as we've been telling you intermittently here, the future of cable is bleak. They're not seeing much profit there, any growth there. It's really a matter of how quickly they're going to continue to lose subscribers and viewers. So all these networks have to figure out the future here, and it comes as sports rights from the leagues are getting absurdly expensive. ESPN has actually been in talks here with the NFL, the NBA, the NHL about a strategic partnership. And they're figuring out their streaming future at ESPN, especially as Disney, Bob Iger, not so interested in it, not seeing profitability there. Right now, they believe they're going to turn ESPN into a direct-to-consumer, straight into your homes, non-cable entity, once the cable world falls below 50 million households, which could happen here in the next couple of years. When cable was peak was nearly 100 million homes in America, and now it's approaching nearly half that, slowly but surely. When talking about sports rights here and how expensive they've gotten, ESPN and Warner Brothers Discovery, TNT, they own TNT, are both in the midst of renegotiating their deal with the NBA. Right now, some believe an NBA rights package could cost upwards of $80 billion over the next decade. And then the NFL just renegotiated with CBS, ESPN, NBC for a $100 billion deal. So these networks, while they're bringing in less money from cable entities, are having to pay even more for sports rights. So Jill will look out for this new sports streaming entity and what it could mean. And it's interesting that it's a partnership between Fox, ESPN, Warner Brothers, all competitors here. Sort of reminds me of early Hulu, which was a cooperative amongst multiple networks.
And Moshe, now to quite a controversial story from the New York Times in its cooking section, which says that the most foolproof way to cook fish, the microwave. I know the Mo News community has been blowing up our Instagram account with thoughts about this, and most are not very good.
You can say that, Jill.
So back to the Times, their review claims that the microwave can turn out perfectly cooked salmon in less than 10 minutes. While it has long been relegated to reheating leftovers and making popcorn, the microwave, undeniably the most unsung method of cooking fresh fish, particularly salmon. The Times says just add salmon, water, and salt to a microwave-safe dish, cover, cook for 3 or 4 minutes, and let it rest for the same amount of time. And what emerges, they write, are buttery, flaky fillets, rich in flavor, that require no oil or messy cleanup at the touch of a few buttons. It takes about 10 minutes. They say you can even swap the water for wine or stock. You could throw spices into the liquid to give it this fresh restaurant quality.
Yeah.
So Moshe, I will turn it over to you because your wife is quite the cook. I'm wondering what you guys think.
Jill, never. I think I can't imagine a scenario where this would even be remotely considered. Jill, would you microwave fish?
As I messaged you last night, I wouldn't for the sole reason of the smell. That I just kind of every once in a while I reheat fish in the microwave and it stinks.
Right. I mean, the reheat, I understand. Some people asked about this. Like, you made fish, you're reheating it. I get it. But you would have to renovate your kitchen every time you cook fish from scratch. And that just seems like a costly way to cook fish. Jill, this is the deal. We did a poll over on the Mo News Instagram account yesterday. And 90% of the Mo News community says they would do one of 3 things if they found out a loved one was cooking fish from scratch in the microwave. They would either stage an intervention, call 911, or disown that family member or friend. Only 10% went with our option, yum, what's the issue?
But Moshe, it turns out that there's actual science behind this, that microwaves are the best way to cook fish.
Yeah, according to the New York fake news Times, microwaves are well suited to cook fish because fish's natural water content absorbs the appliance's electromagnetic waves. Anyway, they go on and on about this and try to do a scientific explanation. I will again say this. We've heard from people who were talking about their mothers-in-law cooking fish from scratch. Also people, Jill, who apparently there's a thing about cooking fish in the dishwasher, which has become a thing in recent years. Yeah, you can wrap up fish and cook it and steam it in the dishwasher. That apparently is a thing. If you Google that, we don't recommend this here on the Mo News podcast, or at least this part of the Mo News podcast, this side of it does not recommend it. I will say this, Stephen King, the horror and crime author, you might be familiar with his books, apparently has been doing this for years, the microwave, not the dishwasher. I don't know about the dishwasher. And he got a lot of crap over it by the Today Show and others a couple years ago. And so some people are saying it's time to owe Stephen King an apology for giving him a bunch of smack over this. Though I will say the overwhelming reaction here is use the air fryer, use the stove. There are proper ways to cook your fish. I don't understand the microwave, but then again, I guess to each their own. But the microwave, I think exclusively in our house, is for popcorn and reheating things, not for cooking things from scratch.
Moshe, I think what we should really do as journalists is make one piece of salmon in the microwave and then make one piece of salmon in the air fryer and do a blind taste test and see which one we like better. But we'll have to use the microwave over at the WeWork space to do it.
Yeah, and we will manage to get kicked out of the Mo News headquarters by using the microwave in that way. So Jill will definitely have to go find another place to do it. I will not defend those actions. But an important experiment. If one of you does it in the meantime, let us know how it goes. All right, finally, we end here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1940, the animated film Pinocchio had its world premiere. It becomes one of Disney's most beloved classics. A big day for the Fab Four. On this day in 1964, the Beatles arrived at New York's JFK Airport to begin their first American tour. They were greeted by thousands of screaming fans. 2 nights later, they performed on The Ed Sullivan Show, the biggest show in America at that time, before 73 million viewers. And really, Beatlemania, if you weren't already familiar with them and into their music at that time, by the time they performed at Ed Sullivan, things hit the next level. All right, a big day in presidential pet history, Jill. On this day, 32 years ago, President George H.W. Bush, Bush the father, put out a memo to the media and staff to stop feeding the White House dog. His name was Ranger. This is the real letter that he wrote that was published and processed on this day in history. Bush writing, the president, again, writing, right now he looks like a blimp. A nice, friendly, appealing blimp, but a blimp. It continues to read that Ranger is on a fat reduction program. All offices in the White House need to take a pledge to, quote, we agree not to feed Ranger. We will not give him biscuits. We will not give him food of any kind. Important presidential pet news, Jill.
I feel like that letter would be politically incorrect right now. Like to call
my dog is
the dog a blimp. I just feel like this wouldn't go over well.
Well, Biden has had his own issues with his dogs during this term because, you know, they've had to leave the White House because they've been biting and attacking the Secret Service agents. So simpler times back then in 92. On this day in media news history, recently in 2018, billionaire Patrick Soon-Shiong, who's working on a cure for cancer, struck a $500 million deal to buy the LA Times, thinking he could turn around the newspaper and other publications. It was part of a number of billionaires getting involved in the media. As he said, it's harder to turn around a newspaper these days than cure cancer. So 6 years later, a lot of the investment here has gone away. Everything that he increased the staff on has been reduced. Part of it, just mismanagement. Part of it, media headwinds in the state of the business. And a couple TV history items here as we end the show. America's Most Wanted premiered on this day 36 years ago. The show helped lead to the arrest of a number of fugitives over the 20 years it was on the air. And finally, now a sign of the times. On this day in 1991, the NBC drama LA Law was the first American network television primetime show to show a same-sex kiss. This was between two female characters on the show, much talked about during that time. A later moment probably gets more attention from the 90s as far as same-sex characters. 1997, The Ellen Show. She had a primetime comedy show at the time, and she comes out on that show. It leads to a People magazine cover story. And to give you a sense of where we were in the 1990s in America, ABC put a parental warning up before that episode where Ellen came out as gay on her primetime show. That show would then end very quickly. She actually blamed the network censors for canceling the show. And then soon after, she would launch her daytime talk show, which aired for a couple decades.
Most should think it was just about a decade later that Madonna, Britney Spears, and Christina Aguilera kissed on the VMAs. And it was, at the time, no big deal. Yeah,
it's fascinating to watch how things that were controversial a couple years later don't seem like a big deal. And at the same time, some things take a long time that even though we did see what happened in LA Law and Ellen in the 90s, gay marriage itself wouldn't become legal in this country until 2015.
All right, Moshe, that is a wrap on this podcast. We want to thank everyone for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
And if you haven't joined us already over at Mo News Premium, give us a shot. It's only $7 a month to support what we're doing here on this podcast, the newsletter, the Instagram account, get access to a premium podcast, get access to an extra Instagram account where we answer your questions. A lot of stuff for Mo News Premium. Check it out over at mo.news/premium. Support us, support independent journalism, and get access, and get even more access to me, to Jill, to everything we're doing here at Mo News.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Later.